Chris Orlob here, and welcome to another episode of the Getting to Club podcast, which is the show where you get to become and stay a President's Club winner in tech sales by stealing the playbooks, the techniques, and the tactics from the top 0.01% of tech sales practitioners and income earners on the planet. And like I've said a few times, sometimes I'm going to be interviewing those people directly on this podcast, not for a long time, 10 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most. And a lot of these episodes, it's just going to be me and my lonesome here talking about some of these techniques. And that's going to be the case for this episode. So what we're going to cover today is why and how to quantify business pain, or at least how to get started quantifying business pain when you're selling with customers, when you're doing discovery, and when you're building a business case. Okay. And where I want to start is why, because I think a lot of us get part of the reason to quantify pain, but we don't understand the full picture. Okay, the reason to quantify pain, the thing that I think just about everybody gets, is it helps you build a business case, right? You are building essentially the cost of not buying your software, the cost of inaction, so that you can financially justify it with an economic buyer or a financial buyer or whoever has authority to release the funds. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, though, is underappreciated, and I'm smiling because that's actually the point of this one, is most customers underappreciate the magnitude and the full scope of the business problem that you're helping them solve. And when you jointly quantify the business problem with your customer, you're doing them a service, okay? That's actually a service to your customer and to your buyer. It benefits you as a seller, of course, but it helps them fully appreciate the magnitude of the problem, the scope of the problem, which helps them prioritize how they're going to tackle it amongst all the other things that they have to tackle. And of course, the benefit to you is it helps increase urgency and scope of the deal. People move faster, they get more powerful people involved when it's well quantified, etc. So now that we understand why you should quantify pain, I'm going to give you a few tips to start to do it well. Okay, doing it all the way to the finish line, creating full business case. We have other episodes for that. That's going to be beyond the scope of this. I have found that a lot of tech salespeople struggle with just how do I even get started quantifying pain? And so there's a couple things. Number one, the first tip is once you've uncovered the business problem with your customer and you have it on the table and you're doing discovery, try asking this question or some variation of it. What metric is suffering most as a result of this challenge? Okay, if you want a more positive way to say that question, what metric would improve the most as a result of solving this challenge? Now, why do I suggest you ask that question? Well, the reason is because just about every business metric, the metrics that are suffering as a result of the challenge that you shared, have some sort of financial value associated with them. Okay, so that's the reason we start there. That is step one in quantifying your customer's business problems. Now, let's get to step two. Some of you might already be thinking, well, Chris, not always, right? Not every metric has financial value with improving it. What about product adoption? Or net promoter score, NPS, or employee engagement, or something like that. So that leads to the second step in quantifying pain, which is make sure you're at the metric behind the metric. Okay, so you're gonna have to peel back the onion a little bit. If the metric you're talking about with your customer doesn't have obvious financial value associated with it, it's because there is a metric behind that metric that you need to uncover that does have financial value associated with it. So I'll go back to a couple examples with you so you understand what good looks like. If I asked a customer, what metric is suffering the most as a result of the challenges you just shared with me? And they say something like product adoption. Our customers are not adopting our product at a rate that we expect, right? We have like 50% adoption or something like that. That doesn't have direct financial value associated with it. But if you then ask a question with, I understand why you want to improve adoption, but what's driving that to be a priority among all the other things that you could be prioritizing? The metric behind the metric that they're going to reveal is probably customer churn. As a result, for product adoption, customers are churning. Our gross retention is only 77% or something like that. Okay. Typical might be 85 or 90% or something like that. Now you've hit pay dirt. Okay. Because if we're talking about churn or renewal rates, there is financial value associated with that, right? If you take, let's say you have a $10 million annual book of business and you have a 77% renewal rate, well, that means you're only going to renew $7.7 million of the $10 million that's up for renewal. And if you improve your renewal rate through increased product adoption from 77% to 80%, that's $3 million. No, that's not $3 million. That's $300,000. I almost did the math wrong myself. Okay, so those are the two steps. I'm going to give a couple examples and they'll close out. Number one, what metric is suffering as a result of the challenges you're sharing with me? Number two, if you're not talking about a metric that has financial value associated with improving it, then you need to peel back the onion and find the metric behind the metric. And that often comes from asking the question, what is driving you to prioritize improving this among all the other things you could be doing right now? And then they'll probably say something like, we have a higher churn rate. So let me give you just a few examples of how this works, right? You're going to have to take the rest of quantifying this to the finish line yourself. It's going to look different for every business. And we have episodes and content that address business cases in depth. But let me give you a couple of examples. If I was talking with a VP of sales, this is actually a true story. This is kind of funny. And I said, tell me about your biggest sales effectiveness challenges. And he says, my reps sound like donkeys on the phone. They are really bad at discovery and demos, and they're just not good. Their selling skills are weak. If I then asked, well, I understand inherently why you would want to improve this donkey-like behavior, but what's driving you to prioritize it among everything else? Actually, no, I would ask a different question. What metric is suffering as a result of the challenge you just shared with me? And he then shared, and again, this is a real story, he said close rates, right? Our close rates are supposed to be 33% and they're at 30%. Now, immediately, I have something that I can sink my teeth into. I'm probably going to come back to it later, but if I help him improve close rates from 30% to 33%, based on how much pipeline he has, based on how much pipeline he will have, deal size, all that kind of stuff, that 3% improvement in close rates is worth money in the bank. Okay, the rest of sales cycle is basically me proving that I'm going to be able to do that. Okay, so that's one example. Let's go back to product. Actually, let's not do product adoption because we've already done that, right? If they're suffering product adoption, it leads to churn. Improving churn and renewal rates is money in the bank. Okay, so let's think of another example here. Let's say employee engagement, right? You're selling to like an HR leader and they say they're sharing challenges about employee engagement. And you say, well, what metric is suffering as a result of this? Let's say they say something that doesn't have obvious financial value. They say, well, our employee engagement scores in Culture Amp or whatever tool they're using to measure employee engagement are pretty low right now. Okay, so not enough financial value associated with that, but we can get to the metric behind the metric. You can say, I 100% get why you would want to improve that. If we didn't live in a world where time and attention were finite resources, you could improve anything. You have finite time and attention, and what is driving you to use that finite time and attention to improve employee engagement rates specifically? In other words, what's going on in the business to make this a priority right now? And they might say, well, we have a lot of first-year turnover on our engineering team. Okay, now you're getting to something because turnover on an engineering team has multiple financial ramifications to it. Number one, you're wasting a bunch of money on recruiting efforts, whether they're external or internal. Two, you're spending a bunch of salary on these people as they're ramping up to speed. And as soon as they get to productivity, they churn. And then three, you probably have a slower time to market with new products because your engineers keep churning. You're not getting products out fast enough. And so you probably have lower competitive win rates or market share or something like that. So there's probably a revenue ramification to it. Okay, so those are three examples. And I want to summarize what you've learned today. The point of this episode was to understand, how do you start to quantify pain and why should you do it? And we covered the why, right? It helps you financially justify a purchase, but it also increases the appreciation of the magnitude of the problem you're solving with your customer, which increases urgency and deal flow and influence and what have you. And then we talked about how you can start quantifying pain. And there's a couple simple steps. Number one, when you've already got the challenge out on the table, ask them what metric is suffering the most as a result of this, or what metric would improve the most as a result of solving this challenge. And if you haven't paid her, right, if you're still talking about a metric that does not have financial value associated with it, all that means is you need to peel back the onion probably one layer and find the metric behind the metric you're talking about that does have financial value associated with it. And then you can sink your teeth into it. You can start doing your back of the napkin math. And later on, you can start building a full-blown, bulletproof, powerful business case that gets deals closed. So that's all I have for you today. If you listen to the other episode on speed of implementation, remember, money loves speed. Money follows speed. Go give this a try. Reduce the delta between learning something new and actually trying it out a few times to get the marbles out of your mouth. Go try it now, and I'll see you in the next episode.